Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين ومن تبعهم بإحسان ودعا بدعوتهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. So yesterday started the first day of Dhul hijjah. So it's important for us to know the virtues and the importance Allah and the Messenger ﷺ is given to this month, so that we can make the most out of this month, and especially the first 10 days of the days of this month, the days of Dhul hijjah. So not only be able to make the most out of it if you understand and we have the knowledge of what this month is all about and how important this month is. So inshallah we're going to cover this today. So we're going to start off by talking about Surah Al-Fajr. So Allah mentions in the Quran in Surah Al-Fajr, which is a Makki surah, very briefly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah. He says, Wal-Fajr. He takes an oath by the dawn. And it says, Walayalin Ashr, and by the 10 nights. Wal-Fajr walayalin Ashr, Wash-Shaf'i wal-Watr, and by the oath of the odd and the even. And then Allah continues. So Allah takes these oaths in the Quran. Allah begins Surah Al-Fajr. So now what do these oaths mean? Why is Allah taking these oaths? So Allah, first of all, Allah says Wal-Fajr, by the oath of the morning. Now according to Mufassirin, there are many different opinions regarding to what this means. Some are of the opinion that this means just morning in general. Some say it's referring to the morning of a specific morning, and some say it's referring to the first morning of Dhul hijjah. Some say it's referring to the last morning of the last 10 days of the first 10 days of the Dhul hijjah, i.e. the morning of the day of sacrifice. There are many different opinions in this. But moving on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He says وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, and He takes an oath by the 10 days. So here the Jamhur, the majority of the scholars and Mufassirun are of the opinion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking these 10 days, it refers to the 10 days of the first 10 days of Dhul hijjah, and majority of the scholars have agreed upon this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken an oath by these 10 days to show us the importance of these 10 days. And then وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I take an oath by the odd and the even, by the odd and the even. Now what does this mean? Again, there's many commentaries, there are many, if you look in the different books of tafsir, mention different aqwal, different opinions are written inside. But it was the opinion of, it's narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh. It's an opinion of Ibn Abbas from the narration of Ikramah and others. The narration reported by Jabir radiallahu anh that the Prophet said, Inna al-ashra ashra al-adha, that indeed the 10 days are the 10 days of sacrifice, i.e. the 10 days of Dhul hijjah. Wal-watru yawmu Arafah, and what it means by watr, i.e. the odd, it's referring to the day of Arafah, which is the 9th, which is an odd number. Wash-shaf'u yawmu nahr, and the even is referring to the even, the 10th day of Dhul hijjah, which is the yawm nahr, the day of sacrifice. So this was the opinion of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, although there are many opinions regarding this. Okay, so now how virtuous is the month of Dhul hijjah? And there are many ahadith, and I was reading about this in different books, that state that Dhul hijjah is the most virtuous month from amongst the months of the year. There's a narration by Abu Sa'id radiallahu anh mentioned in Ibn Majah that the Prophet ﷺ, he said in Hijjatul Wada', the last Hajj that the Prophet ﷺ performed, on the day of sacrifice. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was given a sermon to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and he said to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, أَلَا إِنَّ أَحْرَمَ الْأَيَّامِ يَوْمُكُمْ هَذَا, that indeed know that indeed the most sacred of all the days is this day in front of you, i.e. the day of sacrifice. ألا وإن أحرم الشهور شهركم هذا. And know that indeed the most sacred of all the months is this month, i.e. the month of Dhul Hijjah. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying this is the most sacred month. ألا وإن أحرم البلد بلدكم هذا. And know that the most sacred cities is this city of yours. And then the Prophet ﷺ continues. So this is an authentic narration in Ibn Majah. And then there's other narrations from others saying that أحب الزمان لله شهر الحرام, that the most beloved of time or time of the year in accordance to Allah are the sacred months. وَحَبُّ الْأَشْهُرِ الْحُرُمِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ذُو الْحِجَّةِ. And out of all the sacred months, the most sacred is the month of Dhul Hijjah. وَحَبُّ ذُو الْحِجَّةِ إِلَى اللَّهِ الْعَشْرُ الْأُوَّلِ. And from the Dhul month, inside the month of Dhul Hijjah, the most sacred of days are the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So this has been reported from Ka'ab. And likewise, Sa'id ibn Jubair, he says, مَا مِنَ الشُّهُورِ أَعْظَمُ حُرْمَةً مِنْ ذِي الْحِجَّةِ. That there is no month which is more sacred to Allah than the month of Dhul Hijjah. And again, there are narrations, Sayyid al-Shuhuri Ramadan, that the leader of all the months of Ramadan, وَعَظَمُهَا حُرْمَةً ذُو الْحِجَّةِ. But the greatest of those in being sacred is the month of Dhul Hijjah. So from these few narrations, you understand that Islam has given a significant importance to the month of Dhul Hijjah. In narrations said it's the most sacred month of the entire month of the year, out of all the months of the year. Okay, so now we're going on to the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, which we're in now. Narration of Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to said in narration from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, is مَا الْعَمَلُ فِي أَيَّامٍ أَفْضَلَ مِنْهَا مِنْ هَذِهِ. There is no amal that a person does outside of these months which can be greater than the amals done outside of these 10 days, which can be greater than any amal done within these 10 days. Meaning that any amal done within these 10 days, the first 10 days of the Hijjah, is more virtuous, is more rewarding than any amal done in any other month of the year, whether it's Ramadan, whether it's outside of Ramadan. The amal, the good deeds which are done in these 10 days, i.e. the first 10 days of the Hijjah, outweigh all other deeds. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were shocked at this. Now they knew all the other virtues of all other months. So then the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they inquired, قالوا ولا الجهاد. And obviously they knew the ranks and status of other actions. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum said, not even jihad, in the other months. And the Prophet said, وَلَا الْجِهَادِ, not even jihad. إِلَّا رَجُلٌ خَرَجَ يُخَاتِرُ بِنَفْسِهِ وَمَالِهِ فَلَمْ يَرْجِعْ بِشَيْءٍ. Except for that person who goes with his self and with his wealth and doesn't return, and he becomes martyred. Martyrdom. So the Prophet, apart from this exception, the Prophet said that the deeds done within these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are more virtuous than all the other deeds done in any other part of the year, without an exception. And likewise, there's many other narrations to this degree. Narration of Abu Dawood, and likewise in Tirmidhi, where Ibn Abbas reports that the Prophet said, مَا مِنْ أَيَّامٍ الْعَمْلُ الصَّالِحُ فِيهَا أَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْأَيَّامِ. That all the days, so again, the deeds that are performed in these first 10 days of the month of Ramadan are more virtuous than all the other deeds that are performed in any other time of the year. And قالوا يا رسول الله ولا الجهاد في سبيل الله قال ولا الجهاد في سبيل الله إلا رجل خرج من نفسه وماله فلم يرجع من ذلك بشيء. So Masruq, he stated that regarding the walayal in Ashr, regarding Allah taking oath by the 10 days, he said that they are the most virtuous days of the year. And likewise another narration narrated by Jabir radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet is reported to have said, إِنَّ أَفْضَلَ أَيَّامِ الدُّنْيَا أَيَّامُ الْعَشْرِ. That the most virtuous days of the days of the world are the days of are the 10 days, i.e. the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So now what do we do in these 10 days? So now that we realize that the greatest of months is the month of Dhul Hijjah, the most sacred, and out of the days of the year, the most sacred, the most rewarding, most virtuous days are the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So now what do we do in these 10 days? It's a narration of Ibn Majah that Abu Hurairah narrates that the Prophet said, ما من أيام الدنيا أيام أحب إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يتعبد له فيها من أيام العشر. So again, the same thing we mentioned before, that there is not a thing, the days of the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are more beloved to Allah than that He is worshipped in these days. It is more beloved to Allah than all the other days of the year. And then, but this narration he adds, وَإِنَّ الصِّيَامَ يَوْمٍ فِيهَا لَا يَعْدِلُ صِيَامَ سَنَةٍ. That one fasting for one day in these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, fasting for one day is equal to fasting the entire year. وَلَيْلَةٍ فِيهَا بِلَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. And staying awake and worshipping Allah all night is one of these days is equal to the night of power, equal to Laylatul Qadr. So the fasting of the day is equal to fasting the entire year, and staying awake at night is equal in reward to Laylatul Qadr. Another narration, Musnad Ahmad, wherein Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is reported to have narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, ما من أيام أعظم عند الله ولا أحب إليه من العمل فيهن من هذه الأيام العشر فأكثروا فيهن من التهليل والتكبير والتحميد. So again, the same thing, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that good deeds and a'mal in these 10 days are more virtuous, more rewarding than deeds performed in any other time of the year. And then this narration to add, فَأَكْثِرُوا فِيهِنَّ مِنَ التَّهْلِيلِ. Then be excessive in saying the La ilaha illallah wa takbir Allahu Akbar wa tahmid Allah alhamdulillah. Ayduna dhikr of Allah. So three things that we've established. That in this month what we're supposed to do is number one, in these 10 days try and fast as much as possible. And number two, engage yourself in doing as much as possible the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do as much of dhikr as possible. And number three is staying awake at night. So after the Isha Salah, try to perform as much tahajjud as possible. If you can perform the Isha Salah with Jama'ah. The first thing is performing the Isha and Fajr Salah with Jama'ah. And if possible, try to perform it in the masjid. And then after Isha Salah, try to perform it, if possible, 2 rakats, 4 rakats, 6 rakats or 8 rakats of tahajjud Salah. So tahajjud salah is one of the most important nawafil, optional salahs we can do. And this is one of the best ways to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the fara'id. It's narrated in Sunan al-Darmi regarding Sa'id ibn Jubair radiallahu anhu. It says, وَكَانَ سَعِيدُ بْنُ جُبَيْرٍ إِذَا دَخَلَ أَيَّامُ الْعَشْرِ اجْتَهَدَ اجْتِهَادًا شَدِيدًا حَتَّى مَا يَكَادُ يَقْدِرُ عَلَيْهِ. That Sa'id ibn Jubair, when the 10 days, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah would approach, he'd exert himself in worship of Allah to such a degree, as to such an extent that he wouldn't be able to bear this exertion upon his body. Yeah, he'd worship Allah, he'd perform salah so much, recite the Quran so much, do so much dhikr, as if he wouldn't be able to bear this amount of worship. So the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Salaf, when the 10 days would come, they'd exert themselves as much as possible. Just like how we exert ourselves in Ramadan. So exactly the same way, or even more. We should be exerting ourselves in these 10 days to get as much reward as possible from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise mentioned, regarding the pious predecessors, that Awana, he narrates that when they would enter upon Jurayri in the 10 days, he would say, هذه أيام شغل. These 10 days are very extremely busy. وَلِلنَّاسِ حَاجَاتٍ, people have many desires and many needs. وَابْنُ آدَمْ إِلَى الْمَلَالِ مَهُ. So the Salaf, they would restrict themselves to worship in these 10 days as much as possible. So that's why us as well, we should try and busy ourselves as much as possible in fasting, reciting the Quran, doing the dhikr of Allah, praying tahajjud salah, staying awake as much as possible in the night, and whatever we can do to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like we just mentioned, there's many hadith and narrations, although there is some discussion regarding the sanad, but many hadith saying that fasting one day of these 10 days is like fasting the entire year. So imagine the rewards that we can get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just by fasting. One day, if you can do 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of these 10 days, as much as we can do. And staying awake at night in one of these days is like the reward of staying awake in Laylatul Qadr. So imagine if you stayed up 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, as much as possible, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also narrated from Hafsa radiallahu an and his other wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they narrate أربع لم يكن, in this narration of Sunan al-Nasa'i, أربع لم يكن يدعهن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم صيام عاشوراء. There are 4 things that the Prophet would not leave. Number 1, the fasting of the day of Ashura. Number 2, wal-ashr, fasting of the 10 days of Dhul hijjah. And what it means by that is the first 9 days, because it's not permissible to fast on the 10th as the day of Eid. وَالثَّلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ كُلِّ شَهْرٍ, and 3 days, fasting 3 days of every month. And وَرَكَعَتَيْنِ قَبْلَ الْغَدَاةِ, and 2 rakats in the morning, before the morning prayer. And likewise similar other narrations mentioned in Musnad Ahmad and other books of hadith. So we should make it incumbent on ourselves to fast, to worship Allah, stay away from the disobedience of Allah, and try as much as possible, exert ourselves for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Allah makes some days virtuous over other days. Allah makes some months better than other months, some days better than other days, some nights better than other nights, to give us this encouragement to worship Allah. Because if all the months were the same, and all the days were the same, and all the nights were the same, we wouldn't have any extra encouragement to turn towards Allah, and make our lives for Allah, and worship Allah, and connect our hearts back to our Creator. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He creates His extra virtue and extra reward, to create this desire within our hearts to worship Him. And especially the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dhikr is something we can do all the time. We can do it as soon as we wake up, we can do it while we're walking around, we can do it while we're cooking, we can do it while we're going to school, coming back from school, going to university, coming back from university, while we're at work. All we have to do is make our tongues be in the dhikr of Allah. As we're walking, saying Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, whatever we can. So these are specific 10 days specified for the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the opinion of many of the scholars, that the verse وَيَذْكُرُ اسْمَ اللَّهِ فِي أَيَّامِ مَعْلُومَاتٍ, Allah says that they do the dhikr of Allah, the dhikr of the name of Allah, فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْلُومَاتٍ, in these certain known days. And according to the majority of the mufassirun and scholars, these known days is referring to the 10 days of Dhul hijjah, that Allah specified these 10 days for the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like we mentioned, any good deed done in these 10 days is better, more rewarding, more virtuous than any deed done outside of these months, whether that month be Ramadan. So the rewards of doing good deeds in these 10 days is even more than the rewards of Ramadan. Except there's one exception though. Except that the Fard fast of Ramadan is more virtuous than the Nafil fast of these first 10 days. Because the Fara'id, the compulsory acts, have the greatest rewards. And a Nafil fast in these 10 days cannot have more reward than a Fard fast. So this is the only exception. Whereas whereas doing the dhikr of Allah, reciting the Quran, praying the Tahajjud Salah in these 10 days, these are the Nafil acts, are more virtuous than doing these in the month of Ramadan. That's what the scholars agree upon. So Ali radiallahu anhu is narrated from him that he preferred to do any qadar fast of Ramadan, he'd prefer to do them in these 10 days, due to the immense rewards that this bring, that these 10 days have. And then within the scholars there's a discussion regarding the virtue of the nights of Ramadan. Are the nights of Ramadan more virtuous, or are the nights of these 10 days of Dhul hijjah more virtuous and more superior? So we've already established from the narration of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that he said each night of the night of Dhul Hijjah is equal to one Laylatul Qadr. So this shows that the nights of the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are more virtuous than the nights of Ramadan, even the nights of Ramadan. Subhanallah. Another thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even took an oath in the Quran by these 10 nights, which shows the importance and its virtue. وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, like we mentioned in the beginning. And some scholars have said that these 10 nights collectively are more virtuous than any 10 nights of the month of Ramadan. Although Ramadan has one night which is more virtuous than the 10 nights, which is the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. So some scholars have said, no, the night of power, which is mentioned in which is found in Ramadan, is more virtuous. So there are a few different opinions. But regardless, we can understand and establish that these 10 days are extremely virtuous, to such an extent that they are even more virtuous, according to many scholars, than the nights of Ramadan. And then establishing, going further, what is the most virtuous day from amongst the days of the year. And like we mentioned the hadith before, the Prophet ﷺ, while giving a sermon in Hajjatul Wada', he said, أَلَا إِنَّ أَحْرَمَ الْأَيَّامِ يَوْمُكُمْ هَذَا, that know that the most sacred of days is this day today, i.e. the day of Eid, which is the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So the Prophet ﷺ has called this the most sacred day out of all the days of the year. And now going further, coming closer to an end, just extra virtues given to the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. Many scholars are of the opinion that the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah were the 10 days given to Musa alayhi salam. Regarding the verse where Allah says, وَوَاعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلَةً, that we promised Musa 30 nights, and then we completed it with another 10 nights, making it 40. So Musa alayhi salam was given 40 nights. So it was completed by these 10 nights. So the scholars of the opinion, there's a narration in Musannaf of Abdul Razzaq that he says, regarding the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, وَهِيَ الْعَشْرُ الَّذِي أَتَمَّهُ اللَّهُ مُوسَى. It's mentioned in there, in one of his narrations from Mujahid, that وَهِيَ الْعَشْرُ الَّذِي أَتَمَّهُ اللَّهُ لِمُوسَى. These are the 10 days or the 10 nights which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Musa to complete his 40 days. And another virtue of the of Dhul Hijjah is that in the Islamic calendar, Dhul Hijjah is the last month of the year. And then after this month finishes, we go back to the first month, which is Muharram. So Allah has made this. So out of all the sacred months, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put this sacred month at the end. So this is, since it's the last month of the year, we should strive even more. There's a hadith that the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ, the actions are according to their endings. This is the final month of the year, and after this year will end, we're going into the new year, according to the Islamic calendar. So this is why we should try even harder as well, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, just to recap before we finish, that today we've discussed, number one, Surah Al-Fajr, how Allah takes an oath by the 10 nights, establishing its importance in the Quran, establishing the importance of these 10 nights in the Quran itself. And number two, then we discussed through narrations how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave virtue and superiority to the month of Dhul Hijjah over other months. And then secondly, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave superiority and virtue to the first 10 days of the Hijjah over all other 10 days, over all other days of the year. So then we said that this is why we should perform as much fasting as possible, stay awake at night as possible, as much as possible stay awake at night, perform tahajjud salah, worshipping Allah, engaging ourselves in dua, engaging ourselves in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we mentioned that the most virtuous day out of all the days of the year is the day of Eid, which is the 10th of Dhul hijjah. Then we mentioned the discussion between the scholars that there are many scholars that go to the extent that these 10 days are better than all the 10, and that these 10 nights are better than the nights of even the month of Ramadan itself. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability and tawfiq to utilize the month of Dhul hijjah, and especially the first 10 days.